let's say you're progressing and you are a leader, or maybe you're working with a team. What's the best way to give feedback to that team?
I think when it comes to feedback, the most important thing is knowing that you actually have to give it. How many times do people actually shy away from giving feedback because they don't want to be the bearer of bad news? They don't want to potentially destroy a work relationship because maybe the feedback they're giving is not a good thing. For me, the shift already happened when I realized that the intent of giving feedback is to make the thing better. The thing could be code that you're writing, could be a design that you're making. The thing could be a working relationship. And so it's not about the person that you're giving it to, it's about the thing, the work relationship, the thing that you're making together. And you give it with the intention of trying to make the thing better. And once you realize that, then you realize that it's just iteration. You want to improve the thing, you care. So does the other person. And that's why you give that feedback. The worst thing that you can do, especially when it comes to work relationships, maybe somebody within a team behaved very badly. Maybe that person was always speaking over the rest of the group. And then the rest of the group in future just stops talking. So that's one example of a bad behavior. So how do you do it? There's a very simple framework that I use that was taught to me by a leadership trainer called Paul Mills. And it goes through the situation, the behavior, the impact, the consequence, and then the change that you like to see. Those 5 things. Some of you listening to this might have heard of the SBI framework, but this goes 2 steps more. It talks about the consequence and also the change that you want to see. So to give you a real life example, you could say, John, last night when you used the bathroom, you put the toilet seat up and you forgot to put it down. And when I went in the middle of the night without the lights on, I nearly fell in and could have really hurt myself. Next time after you use the bathroom, could you please put the toilet seat down, please? Right? So that goes through the entire framework. You talk about the behavior, which is not putting toilet seat down. You talk about the consequence, which was really hurting yourself. You could really have hurt yourself. And then you also talk about the change that you want to see, which is next time, put the toilet seat down, please. Now, by using this framework, having this framework in the back pocket, it actually makes giving feedback a whole lot simpler because you're just filling in the blanks. A lot of times when you go into these kind of scenarios and you don't have a framework, feedback is wishy-washy. You don't want to hurt the person's feelings. You start using very imprecise words. You're not being clear. And then the worst case scenario is that the person walks away from this conversation and they don't know what to change. They don't know what they should be doing. So having this framework, you can also write it down. In more serious situations, you might even have to document this behavior because it's serious enough that you might have to actually write it down for reasons after. So writing it down beforehand lets you prepare. You can also practice it because it's going to be a difficult conversation. But always remember that the intention is to make the thing better. A couple of things else. Don't wait more than 24 hours to give feedback. At the same time, don't give it too soon. You want to be doing this when you're in a very emotionally balanced state. But at the same time, you don't want to be waiting 6 months later at this person's performance review to then be talking about something that happened 6 months earlier that they've completely forgotten about, and they don't have the opportunity to change now or to correct the situation. So I find that 24 hours is a nice amount of time. And when you're doing this, especially if you are a leader of a team, what you may not realize is that your group, this group of people that you are leading, they are all looking at you and they are watching how you behave. And as a leader, you and your leadership style and what you're willing to actually accept as bad behavior is really the worst behavior that you're willing to tolerate and do not act upon. What that means is that if somebody does a bad thing, that is a new low. A new low if you do not respond, if you don't say anything, you don't talk to the person about it. That is a new low that you are going to tolerate. And now everybody will realize, you know what? Tom, our leader, This is a new low. He thinks that this behavior, this bad behavior is okay. So maybe all of us should be talking over each other all of the time because he seems to tolerate it. And then one day, if this goes on and on and on, you might realize that you're waking up to a team that is terrible. They're doing all the bad things that you do not enjoy. And that comes down to you because you, as the leader of the group, you didn't say anything. And people are watching and learning to understand how you behave and what you are willing to tolerate as behavior.
So true. You have to set that standard as the leader. And so part of that, I think, is understanding that in yourself. What are behaviors that you will accept and you won't? And you may not know when you first start out in your leadership journey, not having gone into some of these situations, you might not have thought about, well, this is okay with me, that's not okay with me. And then over time, you kind of come up with your own internal rule book of what you will or won't accept. And then it's just a matter of making it proactive and addressing it as it comes up.
And the most important thing, these are hard conversations. And again, it takes practice. And having a framework in your back pocket always helps because you can fill in the blanks. But it's important to have them.
It's important for you, but also for the other person. If you're a leader and you really care about that person, this is something that's going to help them in their career and their life. So I always find it helpful to think about it as it coming from a point of caring or service to the person on your team.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking about sharing hard truths, what if you have to share an uncomfortable truth with your boss?
The first thing I'll say is that there's already a power differential there, right? Between giving feedback upwards, speaking truth to power. Doing this carries huge personal risk, huge. Your boss can fire you. You can't really fire your boss. So that's the first thing that I'll put out there. I actually created a program with a partner of mine. His name is Ryan Ramsey, and he runs the Chief Design Officer School. The program that we put together was called Convince Your Boss, how to frame your solutions as the obvious choice. And it's hard because a lot of times we may not feel like we have all of the power, all of the decision rights. We belong to other people, if only they cared as much as we did. And all we talk about is really trying to understand and trying to figure out when is the right time to actually argue. Like, do we argue now? Do we actually play the long game? Maybe right now I don't have all the information, but I need more time to actually build up my case. Or maybe you have a scenario where your boss is just so dead set on a particular way of doing things or doing a certain things in a certain way. In that case, do not argue because you're going to be putting yourself in a position where you have too much personal risk. Again, your boss can fire you. You can't fire your boss. So a lot of this is also about recognizing your boss's behavior. How likely are they to even want to hear a different point of view? In the course of our career, as we were developing this curriculum for the program, we actually synthesized all of the kinds of bosses and stakeholders that we encountered into 6 archetypes. They were things like the authoritarian, the bean counter, but the micromanager, the design by committee boss, the friend boss, the visionary. The reasons why we came up with these archetypes was to really help people very quickly identify when to argue. You might have an authoritarian that says, go left. This is the wrong time to say, I want to go right. Because, the person is dead set. They're not open to be convinced. This is not the right time to argue. But maybe in a different time, a different context, they have a different behavior. Then that's the right time to argue. Everything else is about really how to actually structure your argument. So much times we've spoken to people and they care so much about this thing and they make their arguments through their lens of what they care about. If only other people cared as much as they did. And that's how they build their arguments, trying to get other people to care more about the thing that they cared about. What we found is it's way easier and way better to actually understand what your bosses care about, what they think, what matters to them, what moves their needle. And then you figure out how you can ladder up what you care about to what they care about and how that can be mutually beneficial. If you can do that, figure out what they care about, what moves their needle, and how your thing ladders up and moves their needle. That's a much more convincing and easier way to build an argument. And that's everything that we teach within that course. But if you remember nothing else, remember, you don't have to argue all of the time, especially in a work environment where you're working with executives. It carries huge personal risk. So choose your arguments carefully.
That's right. And it's something that I think is maybe a little bit more intuitive to people in the sales and marketing space, that because marketing kind of starts as you're trained to understand and communicate the value of what you're doing in terms of that, of what the customer understands or the user understands, which I mean, maybe in design, that's, there's some of that as well. And I find sometimes people from more technical backgrounds, this is the most important thing, but they don't necessarily have that training to think about putting things in terms of what the other person cares about. So it's really helpful.
Yeah.
So help me make small talk. I mean, I'm saying me, but I've done a lot of this over time, so I have some more comfort with it. But a lot of introverts do not love making small talk because they prefer to be connecting deeply, having more meaningful conversations, and they kind of see it as an annoyance. So how can we think about this?
Well, small talk, how I made peace with it, or how I really wrapped my head around it, was understanding that small talk was not real talk. Real talk is what happens after. It's an extension of saying hi. It's an opportunity to connect with somebody at a more human level, and that's what it is. And in order to do that well, I use the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Basically, it says that we, as human beings, have 5 types of needs, and it exists on a stacked triangle. So starting at the bottom, you have physiological needs, followed by safety needs, love and belonging, self-esteem, and then self-actualization. So when you're actually trying to make small talk with somebody, you're trying to build a connection before the real talk actually begins. So when you're making small talk, focus on the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Things like physiological needs. Have you had lunch yet? What did you eat? It could be safety needs. You could be talking about the weather. You could be talking about how last night we had a storm and our roof is leaking right now. You could be talking about love and belonging, your pets, your sports that you're interested in. If you focus on the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then you have a higher chance of actually making a connection with somebody else. You might find that you have something in common. If you focus on the higher levels, whether it's self-esteem or self-actualization, like how you just bought a BMW, or maybe you just got yourself a Rolex watch, or maybe how you have dreams of being a rock star. These might not be things that, are easy to connect, to have a connection with other people in. But the things lower down in the hierarchy, food, shelter, pets, these are things that most people could find something they have in common. And if your goal is really to have some kind of connection before the real talk begins, then I encourage you to focus on the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, it's a helpful framework or reference. A lot of times you hear compliment somebody on something that they're wearing that's low on the hierarchy of needs, clothing. And a lot of times this happens in networking events. So what's a good way, how should you approach networking events as a quieter person?
Online and offline is a short answer. People always think about networking as networking events, walking into a room of people that you don't know that are meeting for the first time. This kind of context really suits people, I think, who are extroverted in nature, who like that kind of stimulation, not me. I'm always the awkward one that's standing in the corner of a room and then getting so uncomfortable that I'll just start staring at my phone and when wondering why I'm there in the first place. The thing that changed was really for me when I realized that the goal of networking is resourcefulness. It's to grow the number of people that I know that I can help and who can help me. And that was the goal. And I can only do that if I actually go and actually meet people and get to know them. And you don't always have to do this online or offline. If you're doing it in person, there are 2 things that you can try. Number one, you don't have to stay in one spot. You can always walk around the room. And when you walk around the room, what that happens is you actually increase the surface area and the number of chances of you meeting interesting people. You don't want to be walking from point A to point B. You want to be taking long meandering loops so that, again, you're increasing your surface area and increasing the chances of you bump into interesting people. If you see this person that's really interesting that you want to talk to, but they're talking to somebody else, that's okay. You can always come back around. The second thing you can do for in-person networking is to join a queue. Every event has got a queue. Whether it's a queue to the bathroom, whether it's a queue to get food or drinks, there's always some kind of queue. And within a queue, you have a captive audience. You have one person in front and one person behind because all of you are in a queue. So why not use this as an opportunity to get to know one or two people? So there's two things you can try, walking the room and joining a queue in person. But the truth is, most of my networking that I do these days is online, it's on LinkedIn. I think that's how we met as well, because we connected with each other on LinkedIn. And then maybe it's exchanging a few direct messages, maybe commenting on each other's posts. We start to build a connection with each other. And then at the right point, you can always meet up and have a conversation. Or in this case, joining the other person's podcast, which is how we actually connected in the first place. So you don't always have to think of networking as in person. Most of the networking I do these days is actually online. But the goal is still the same, is to become more resourceful so that you can help other people when the time comes.